In 1989, John Hughes, the legendary Hollywood screenwriter behind classics like The National Lampoon's Vacation Films, 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Weird Science, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, came together with actor and comedian John Candy for their second collaboration, Uncle Buck. It was on this film where Hughes met future child actor megastar Macaulay Culkin. Sometime later, Hughes was preparing to go on vacation with his family, and while making sure he'd packed everything, and made sure his home would be secure while they were all away, he thought to himself, I better make sure I don't forget my kids. But then he began to ponder the question, what if? Specifically, what if I did leave my kids behind by mistake, and I was someplace where I couldn't call them to make sure they were okay? What would I do? What would they do? Running through this thought experiment, John wrote down a series of notes chronicling these thoughts, which he later expanded into a full screenplay for what became 1990's Home Alone. The script was eventually given to director Chris Columbus, the filmmaker who would eventually go on to direct the first two Harry Potter films. Hughes immediately suggested Culkin for the role of the main character, Ken McAllister, having really enjoyed working with the kid on Uncle Buck, and upon meeting with them, Columbus quickly saw the writer's logic. The film was eventually released on November 10th, 1990, and was a smash hit, making over $470 million worldwide against an $18 million budget, and holding the record for highest grossing Christmas film for a whopping 28 years until the release of Illumination's The Grinch. The film began the rise of Macaulay Culkin, leading to the kid becoming a millionaire before he'd even hit puberty. Naturally, with such a big hit, the film wound up spawning a franchise that contained a grand total of not one, not two, but 5 sequels, none of which were ever particularly well received by critics, and only 2 of which were ever shown in theaters, but one of which most agree is a pretty fun time, even if you're not the biggest fan of a certain someone who made a cameo in this particular film. A 6th installment in this franchise, entitled Home Sweet Home Alone, was released just last month, and considering that the first 2 movies are, well, my favorite Christmas movies of all time, I thought I might have some fun and go back and discuss the series and see if it's actually worth watching after Culkin turns 16. Plus, I really feel like I need to get back into making videos again because I feel like a piece of crap for not making more these past 2 years, and I figure a big video like this will restore my mental health for some reason. I don't know why, but I just want to make something so I can actually feel like I've accomplished something. I really need to see a therapist. Moving on though, ground rules before we get started. This is 6 movies, so instead of doing a full review for each installment, I'm just going to hit a plot summary and give a few thoughts I have for each movie, then move on to the next. Okay? Okay, let's get this show on the road. Plot summary. Ken McAllister is an average kid who no one understands. He's got a crappy older brother who hates his guts, a bunch of cousins who don't respect him, and a family full of relatives who don't really care about him at all. The McAllister family have all come together to go on a trip out to Paris for Christmas, but are all staying at Kevin's house before the trip. Like with any family event, tensions run high, and Kevin loses his patience with his mean brother and picks a fight with him, causing a big mess in the dining room. Kevin is then sent upstairs to his bedroom by his mother, where he ends up sleeping by himself. However, that night, a big storm causes the power lines to be knocked out for a moment, meaning everyone's alarms never went off because it's 1990 and no one has a smartphone with a personal alarm clock on it. As such, when morning comes, everyone wakes up and it's a mad dash to get up, get ready, and head out. Everything seemingly goes fine until we cut back to the McAllister home in Chicago to see a very groggy-looking Kevin walking down the stairs, wondering where the heck everyone went. No. But Kevin has bigger problems than just being left home alone. A pair of burglars named Harry and Marv have been scoping out houses in Kevin's neighborhood, and the McAllister home is their final mark. Realizing their intentions after their first attempt at a break-in, Kevin sets up a series of traps in and around his home that all end up maiming the would-be thieves in increasingly horrific yet also hysterical manners. The duo are subsequently slowed down enough to be picked up by the police, who subsequently escort them to the big house. Kevin is then reunited with his family, who all apologize in their own ways for leaving him behind and for not being as kind to the little kid as they could have been. The film then ends with a lovely musical cue from the great John Williams and credits roll. End of summary. The original Home Alone film is a classic movie, for as much as people like to joke about the infamous "ah" scene, Macaulay Culkin was a genuinely great actor as a child. He manages to be both kind of a brat, but also incredibly endearing and witty. You'll see as we go on that many other young actors will try to strike this balance and really can't quite hit the mark, unfortunately. But on the flip side, Catherine O'Hara as Kevin's mother Kate is this film's anchor. She dances from a firm authority when disciplining Kevin to nearly despondent when she realizes she's accidentally left her own son behind, to being downright ferocious when confronting airport staffs about getting back home so she can make sure her freaking kid is okay, to being just plain desperate when pleading with another woman to let her take her place on a plane to get back to the States so she can get back to her son, to being overjoyed when seeing said son again, after being unsure if he was safe for 3 whole days. And on the flip side, well, what good are your heroes if you don't have decent villains to oppose them? Such is the delight of Daniel Stern as Marv and the great Joe Pesci as Harry. These two have a great chemistry and make for such great slapstick comedy. They sell the pain from these traps in such a way that makes you feel the hurt, but also doesn't make you worried that Kevin is actually going to kill these guys, despite what certain corners of the internet would like to tell you. Plus, while they're so great at looking stupid, they're actually quite brilliant when the time comes to flip the switch. When Kevin runs up his neighbor's basement to find Harry and Marv standing above him on the ground floor, it is suddenly terrifying. Joe Pesci saying the words, "Hiya, pal," to Macaulay Culkin is far more terrifying than anything even the best comic book villains have ever done. But that all said, the true star of this show is not Mr. Culkin, nor is it Ms. O'Hara, nor is it Mr. Stern and Pesci. The true star of this film is the immortal John Williams. There are so many moments in this film that are made just so much better by this score, and don't tell me you don't get the warm and fuzzies every time you hear Somewhere in My Memory. So yeah, like I said, the first Home Alone is a modern classic and I adore it. It's a 5 out of 5. Is that nostalgic talking? Maybe. Do I care? Absolutely not. Plot summary. Taking place 1 year after the first Home Alone 2 follows Kevin still having a rotten relationship with his siblings and his extended family, while they're getting ready to take yet another vacation for Christmas. This time, instead of out to Paris, they're headed for Miami, which Kevin thinks is pretty lame. Luckily for Kevin, due to a mix-up, he doesn't end up in Miami. Unluckily, he still gets on a plane and ends up in New York City. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. But it actually works out pretty well for Kevin, because in the midst of all the commotion in the airport in Chicago, Kevin was given his father's wallet and already had his novelty tape recorder. With the assets afforded to him by adult money and children's toys, Kevin books himself a stay in the Plaza Hotel and all the luxuries that go with it. Things swing back around to being unfortunate when we find out that Harry and Marv have escaped from prison and are on the prowl for a big score that can run them off to somewhere tropical. Maybe they'll also go to Miami. This is unfortunate because at one point, Harry spots Kevin and immediately recognizes him and quickly knows he wants to do something terrible to the little punk who put him behind bars with his idiot partner. Kevin runs for his life back to the plaza, but the staff have discovered that the card charged to Kevin's room is actually stolen. Kevin then realizes he has to run from the staff now and ends up at the partially renovated residence of his uncle. Knowing that Harry and Marv are planning to knock off a local toy store that plans on dropping off their sales to a children's charity in New York, Kevin buckles down and lures the bandits to his current hideout, where they play the same game they played in the suburbs of Chi-Town 12 months earlier. The burglars then chase Kevin off to Central Park, where Harry and Marv try to kill Kevin, but are ultimately stopped by the arrival of the police. Having evaded death for the second year in a row, and currently not having anywhere else to go, Kevin stops off at the Rockefeller Center to just enjoy the view of their gigantic Christmas tree, and makes a plea to God to just send his family to him so he can apologize to them and they can all enjoy the holiday together. As if on cue, Kevin's mother arrives to greet her son, having searched far and wide to find her boy again, just like last year. The McAllister clan then all meet back up at the plaza, where they enjoy a pretty fantastic Christmas day together, and credits roll once again. End of summary. The first Home Alone sequel was released in 1992 with Macaulay Culkin returning as Kevin McAllister. It walked away with $359 million against a $28 million budget, making slightly less money for a slightly more expensive movie. Not quite as big of a smash as the first movie, but definitely still a pretty decent profit. The film could best be described as the first movie but bigger. If doing Home Alone but this time in NYC sounds like your thing, you'll definitely have a good time, but if you were hoping that they could shake up the formula this time, you will probably not be pleased. I'll concede it's not quite as strong of a script as the first movie, but it's a delightful picture all the same. Everything great about the first movie, Culkin, Pesci, O'Hara, and Stern's performances, John Williams' score, and the hilarious slapstick comedy, it's all still great here. I love this movie. I have a great time with it every time I watch it. So, I'm gonna go big. I'm gonna give Home Alone 2 Lost in New York a 4.5 out of 5. Plot summary. This one is a big departure from the first two films. 1997's Home Alone 3 features neither Macaulay Culkin nor Kevin McAllister. Instead, this film now stars retired child actor Alex Linz as our main character, Alex Pruitt. The little guy left home alone while his parents are at work because he's got the chickenpox. Pretty normal day in the life turned pretty abnormal when freaking Russian spies burst into his home to steal a remote-controlled toy car that's hiding a computer chip that can cloak nuclear missiles? Didn't this start out as a vehicle for Macaulay Culkin? Didn't this start as a star vehicle for Macaulay Culkin? What the heck happened here? Anyway, the truck that they were supposed to take with them wound up in the possession of an older woman in Alex's neighborhood. When Alex sees these weirdos harassing the grouchy old lady from across the street, the weirdos in turn realize they're being watched by this little boy, and also that the truck they hid the chip in was given to Alex. Alex realizes why these guys even want this truck and contacts a local Air Force recruiter about the matter. The last movie was about two jerks trying to knock up a toy store. Anyway, through the power of slapstick comedy, Alex manages to stop the bad guys, who are then picked up by the CIA and taken to prison. End of summary. God, this movie was weird. You know, looking at this from John Hughes' point of view, I can almost see what he was going for here. The first movie was pretty small scale. The first Home Alone was literally about a kid being home alone when a pair of burglars try to break into his house, and he does his best to protect his home from invaders. Pretty straightforward. The second movie ups the ante a bit by putting Kevin by himself in the middle of New York City and having burglars try to rob a toy store instead of someone's house, and having the big fight take place in what looks like an under construction brownstone instead of just a normal upper middle class home. That's a little bit bigger, but that's not too much bigger. It's not going from a cashier at McDonald's to running the whole darn company. That's going from being the cashier to being the manager. But the progression from 2 to 3 is like going from being the cashier at your local McDonald's to being tapped to be Joe Biden's new Secretary of Agriculture. How in the world does that even work? How does that happen? But that all said, as far as the actual movie goes, it actually is pretty enjoyable. Alex Linz does not have anywhere near the level of charisma that Macaulay Culkin had, but he's also not called to be the smart guy that Ken McAllister was. He's a sweet little boy who just wants to watch out for his friends, his neighbors, and his family. Evelyn Morris, a working actress with a list of credits longer than your arm, plays Kevin's mother, and she does a really good job. She comes off as a very sweet mother who cares about her kid, but isn't as, for want of a better term, overbearing as Catherine O'Hara was. The Russian spies aren't as funny as Harry and Marv, but the actual slapstick had me laughing harder than the first two movies a couple times. But maybe that's just because I watched the first two movies every single year come November, and I haven't seen this movie in probably a good 10, maybe even 11 years. Ultimately, Old Home Alone 3 is definitely the inferior to Home Alone 1 and 2. It's still a perfectly good movie. It's definitely not the strongest work in John Hughes' filmography, but it's still a pretty enjoyable film. I'm going to give Home Alone 3 a 3.25 out of 5. Home Alone 3 was nowhere near the success that its predecessors were, making only $78 million against a $32 million budget. Ouch. Though amusingly, in this movie's defense, legendary film critic Roger Ebert actually enjoyed this film far more than the first two.
Now this is going to astound you, but I'm giving the movie thumbs up.
It does astound me. Are you okay?
Better than you were the day that you liked Starship Troopers.
Okay. Oh, no.
I'll tell you why I like the movie.
Exciting.
This movie empowers little kids. This is the one where they finally got it right. I liked it better than the other two.
Than the original Home Alone?
Two more sequels were eventually released as TV movies, the first of which aired on ABC in 2002. Not a great sign, but sometimes a TV special will surprise you. This isn't HBO, but you never know. Sometimes you'll be surprised. The production for Home Alone 4 seemingly wanted to go back to what made the first Home Alone work, that being the character of Kevin McAllister. Culkin was 22 by the time of this filming, so we are now being introduced to his replacement, a young Mr. Mike Weinberg. No relationship to those Weinbergs, but that sure would be pretty cool. Plot summary. Sometime after the second Home Alone film, Kevin's mother and father, Peter and Kate, have apparently decided to split up and go their separate ways. Pete's now got a hot rich lady named Natalie to keep him busy, but he still wants to have a relationship with his family and offers to bring his children over to their house to visit for Christmas. Buzz and Megan, Kevin's sister, turned dear old dad down, but after a night of some particularly harsh abuse from Buzz, Kevin decides, screw it, let's hang out with the rich people for Christmas. Things are all peaches and cream for old Kevin, outside of the kind of grouchy butler, until he sees a familiar face. Marv. Who, for some reason, looks like Harry now. Kevin immediately knows this is bad news and acts to stop them, but notices that he and his new wifey, Vera, didn't have to break in. They just walked on through the front door. Realizing this means an inside man inside the mansion, Kevin quickly concludes that it has to be Prescott, the aforementioned grouchy butler. Marv and his wife make 3 more attempts to break into Peter's new home, not wanting to steal things this time, but to steal a person, specifically a crown prince from an unspecified country coming to visit the McAllister home. Again, this started as a star vehicle for Macaulay Culkin. What the heck? Kevin eventually traps Prescott when Molly, the McAllister maid, explains that Prescott isn't their inside man. She is. Molly then locks Kevin away in the same basement Kevin had just locked Prescott in. Quick to forgive and wanting to make sure the kidnappers don't get their grubby little paws on the prince, Prescott slips Kevin into the mansion's dumbwaiter system and sends him back into the kitchen. Chaos and typical Home Alone shenanigans ensue, and they all end with the bad guys being arrested and escorted away. Tired of Peter's girlfriend's crap, Prescott resigns from serving at the manor, and Peter decides he'd rather spend Christmas with his wife and kids instead of his hot new girlfriend. End of summary. Is this a bad movie? No, I don't think so. Is this a good movie? Let's not get crazy. The plot is mostly fine outside of a really bizarre subplot dropped in the latter half of the movie, where it turns out Peter's girlfriend is kind of a cruel person who threatens to kick Kevin out if he tries to drive a wedge between her and his father. Thinking of it now, I think the story might have flowed better if Natalie were the inside man and there just plain was no Molly character. As delightful as Miss Barbara Babcock is, I also found it strange how all the characters were de-aged. Kevin was 12 years old in Home Alone 2, but here he's only 8. Big difference. I'd already mentioned how French Stewart was made to look a lot more like Joe Pesci as Harry than Daniel Stern as Marv, even though he's playing Marv. That said, Home Alone 4 is a perfectly adequate way to spend your time. If you bought a 5-movie Blu-ray pack of all the Home Alone series a couple years ago because it was on sale and you really love those first 2 Macaulay Culkin movies, give this one a watch if you haven't already. You aren't missing a lot, but you're still missing something. Mike Weinberg is about as up to snuff with Culkin as Alex Linz was, which is to say, he isn't. But he still plays a pretty sweet kid who definitely manages to pull off a few sassy one-liners here and there. French Stewart and Missy Pyle have terrific comedic chemistry as Marv and Vera, and all the slapstick is lots of fun here. And plus, Eric Avari as Mr. Prescott is just the absolute best. I love this man so much. This is definitely the weakest of the bunch so far, but it's still perfectly watchable. I'm going to give Home Alone 4 a 2.5 out of 5. Home Alone 5 was dropped on what was then ABC Family, but is now Freeform in 2012. 10 years after Home Alone 4 and a good 20 years after Home Alone 2. The only noteworthy thing about it is that it features Malcolm McDowell and the late great Ed Asner. Let's get into the plot summary. Home Alone 5 follows the Baxter family who just moved from California to Maine, a for the mother of the family scored a really good job out in the Northeast. The children, Ben and Alexis, both have a hard time adjusting to their new home, hailing from a far warmer climate and both feeling more comfortable with their technology. Ben with online gaming, Alexis with social media and texting her friends back in California. Their parents, however, are very insistent that their children at least try to get to know the kids in their neighborhood. Finn in turn tries to get to know Mason, a local boy obsessed with snow, who tells Finn that his new house is haunted. Hearing this and already being uncomfortable in his new home, Finn immediately interprets every creepy or unnerving thing he notices in his new home as being haunted by ghosts. The real truth isn't that the house is haunted, it's being subjected to a rich guy's heist, along with his two Nimrod associates who are trying to steal a very old, very valuable painting in a secret room in the Baxter's new home's basement. Finn eventually realizes this, sets up a series of traps with his older sister, while their parents are out at a company party to stop the bad guys from claiming their prize. The parents then return to see the bad guys being taken away by the police, winning a crap ton of money from both the painting and putting away the bad guys, and then having a pretty great Christmas together. The film then ends properly, with Finn running out to go snowboarding with his new best friend 1 year later. End of summary. Home Alone 5 was probably the most boring of the bunch. It's a lot of very typical parents giving their millennial, now Gen Z kids a hard time for liking video games or liking talking to their friends online. And when the actual trip starts, it's probably some of the least memorable, least creative material so far. A girl gets stuck in a window, and then Mr. McDowell and the other guy try to help pull her out, and Finn keeps throwing stuff at her butt to make her think Mr. McDowell and the other guy are smacking her butt. So she kicks them both in the face. It's not the best stuff. It's probably not even on the level of the last two movies. The cast is perfectly serviceable, but even Malcolm McDowell isn't particularly memorable just beyond the fact that he's Malcolm McDowell. I'm going to give Home Alone 5 a 2 out of 5. It's not bad. It's just boring. A sixth installment entitled Home Sweet Home Alone was released just less than a month ago as of this writing on November 12th, 2021 on Disney+. Unlike the last two, however, it's pretty clear there's some actual money behind this one. While the previous two starred pretty much unknown actors or just working actors with no real star power outside of the aforementioned French Stewart in Home Alone 4, and Malcolm McDowell and Ed Asner in Home Alone 5. Home Sweet Home Alone stars Jojo Rabbit's Archie Yates, Rob Delaney, Kimmy Schmidt herself, Ellie Kemper, Pete Holmes, and even SNL legend Kenan freaking Thompson. It has a script from fellow SNL alumnus Mikey Day and Streeter Seidel, and was directed by Dan Mazer, who produced and co-wrote Sacha Baron Cohen's Borat and Bruno. Well, let's see if this gang can come up with some magic. Plot summary. Our story starts not with Archie Yates' Max Mercer, but with Rob Delaney and Ellie Kemper's Jeff and Pam McKenzie, a pair of broke adults preparing to sell their home because they just can't afford it anymore. We soon meet up with Max and his mother Carol as they pop in to the McKenzie home under the pretense of looking at the home, but in actuality, because Max has to pee really, really bad and they needed to stop somewhere for a quick bathroom trip. While there, Carol spies Jeff's collection of misshapen antique dolls and offhandedly mentions that apparently they can sell for $200,000. Intrigued, Jeff looks into this and finds that his dolls are indeed worth a lot of money. He tries to find his dolls again once Max and Carol have left, only to find the most valuable one missing. Remembering their terse exchange earlier, Jeff assumes Max must have stolen the doll and taken it home with him. Jeff then finds the Mercer home as everyone is getting ready to leave for their trip to Tokyo, and he tries to speak to Max's uncle, hoping to get a hold of Carol, but the man just assumes Jeff is their Uber driver. Jeff then runs back home to his wife and realizes that the entire family is gone for the holidays, so they could probably just make a quick run in and out, get the doll, and go home. But to their surprise, they find that Max is still home, having been left by himself by mistake. The two of them try to break into their home the next night on Christmas Eve, but Max tries his best to fight them off, with booby traps having overheard their talk about wanting to steal their doll back, and misunderstanding their talk about grabbing the ugly little boy as wanting to kidnap him. Eventually, the two adults corner the kid and tell them to please stop trying to torture them because they just want to get their freaking doll back. A very confused Max then explains that he never took the doll from them. All he took was just a can of soda. Max then explains that he's been left home alone by mistake. The Mackenzies, having assumed this whole time that Max was with his grandmother after overhearing Carol threaten to leave him home in Chicago with his grandma, immediately kick into parent mode and offer for the little guy to spend the rest of the holidays with them while he waits for his mom to get back. Once back home, the Mackenzies rediscover their doll, and Carol arrives not long afterward. We then flash forward to a year later with the Mackenzies and the Mercers all enjoying Christmas dinner together. Aw, end of plot summary. I hated this movie. Straight up. No dancing around the subject. I hated it. I sat down to watch this with my mom and my younger brother. My brother loved it, and my mom hated it just as much as I did. And I think the biggest problem with this movie is the fact that with all these other movies, the people breaking into the house, they're bad guys. They're trying to hurt a kid. They have selfish motivations. Home Alone 1. Harry and Marv are breaking into people's homes and stealing their possessions and their money. Home Alone 2. Harry and Marv are trying to knock off a toy store to steal charity money. Home Alone 3. A group of spies are breaking into homes to steal back a computer chip that can help North Korea fire ballistic missiles undetected by radar. Moving on. Home Alone 4. Marv, his wife, and his mother come together to kidnap the prince and hold him ransom. Okay, Home Alone 5. Malcolm McDowell, a safecracker, and some lady work together to break into a house to steal a valuable painting that the homeowners don't know that they possess. Okay, yeah, the plots go really off the rails after 2, but the point is, these are all bad guys doing bad things for money. In this movie, these people just want to take back something that they thought was taken from them, so they can sell it, so they can make enough money to keep their house. That's all. That's all they want. They just want to get their property back so they won't have to uproot their family and go somewhere new. And this poor kid is torturing them because he thinks they want to kidnap him. I will say, though, there are a couple details I did like throughout the movie. There's a moment where Max asks the stand-in for Alexa to tell him the best booby traps they could find, and the Alexa replies, "There is a parental block on the word booby." And Max, without skipping me, just says, "Never mind." I also like how there's a moment where Max is trying to get anyone, to give him some attention, but everyone's busy or invested in other stuff. So he goes out to the garage, gets in the back of his family's car, turns on a tablet in the car, and puts on some classic Looney Tunes. I think it's a cute scene and kind of an interesting way to explain where Max came up with the idea for all these slapstick gags. And that's it. I did not like anything else about this movie. And in addition to not liking the actual plot, I don't like the kid very much. Archie Yates is a good child actor and a pretty cute kid in general, but Max Mercer is just a little brat. I can't stand him. Where I thought Home Alone's 3, 4, and 5 suffered from having the kid be kind of too nice, I think this movie suffers from having a kid that's too spiteful, too snarky, and trying too hard to be smart. It's like these producers had the same thought about these last 3 movies and said, okay, let's go exactly that far, but in the opposite direction. Macaulay Culkin as Ken McAllister was a really good balance of being arrogant and snobby and being actually quite charming and kind of sweet. But Archie's Max Yates is nowhere near as charming as Culkin ever was. So, in the end, I'm going to give Home Sweet Home Alone a 1 out of 5. It's not incompetently made, it just stinks, and I don't like it. Final thoughts. Not a single one of these films outside of the original was ever positively received. Every subsequent theatrical film was torn apart. Both TV movies are completely forgotten about and not currently available on any of these streaming platforms. And the new Disney Plus movie is being torn apart just like its older brothers from the Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton administrations. I'd say the lesson here would be Hollywood would be well off leaving good enough alone. But honestly, I don't think there's no value in doing a Home Alone movie in the early 2020s, or the early 2010s, or even the early 2000s. I just don't think Home Alone is a concept that Hollywood in this day and age can approach, because when it comes to family entertainment in Hollywood, Hollywood only has 2 modes right now. Earnest fantasy stuff, or funny commercial-based stuff. There's no real room left for something that's earnest, but also funny, like the original Home Alone was, and to a lesser extent, like Home Alone 2 was. Regardless, I'd say if this holiday season you're at a Walmart or a Target or a Best Buy, and you spy a multi-pack of the Home Alone films, and it's something like $30 for 5 movies, skip it. If you see just a double pack of 1 and 2 for the same price, honestly, buy it. Is that being smart with your money? Maybe not. Are the other 3 movies really worth your money? No, they're not. I gave passing grades to 3 and 4, but all you really need to watch are the Macaulay Culkin films. Buy the Blu-ray, buy the DVD, buy them on iTunes or Amazon, watch them on Disney+. It doesn't matter. Just watch them because they're really delightful. I'm going to give the Home Alone series as a whole a 2.5 out of 5, but the Macaulay Culkin duology specifically, I give a 5 out of 5 too. Do I sound like a nostalgia-blind adult? Probably. Am I wrong? No, I don't think I am. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. If you like what I've said here, I've previously done a retrospective in the Predator series, which is amusingly irrelevant thanks to this fantastic meme. If you're interested in more family-friendly fare, I've previously discussed the original SpongeBob SquarePants movie, the Zack Snyder film Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, and the Netflix film Enola Holmes. I've also discussed all 5 of Disney's Star Wars films. That's The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker, Solo, and Rogue One. And I've also talked about so many comic book movies, including both Justice League films, Wonder Woman, Batman vs. Superman, Man of Steel, Watchmen the comic and the movie, Deadpool 2, Aquaman, the original Suicide Squad film, Shazam, Infinity War, Joker, 2019's Hellboy, Alita Battle Angel, the Blade Trilogy, Black Panther, the Venom films, and Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film. Speaking of which, I'll also be doing a ranking video for all of the various Spider-Man films in the lead up to Spider-Man No Way Home. I'll also be starting a series the day after Christmas on my TikTok discussing each WWE Royal Rumble pay-per-view leading up to the 2022 Royal Rumble on January 29th. I'll be posting a link to my TikTok account along with playlists with all the videos I mentioned already down below. Until then, have a great day everyone. Woodstock